Shalom, חברות וחברים. Hello and welcome, friends from all around the world. As you can hear and see, this is a very special episode for us, and that's why we are trying to speak in English. My name is Daniel Adar, and I'm here with my partner and wife, Yolanda Michelle. And some of us speak fluent Hebrew. The rest of us will try to do our best, but we were asked by many friends to do an episode, at least in English, especially after a year exactly of the October 7 Hamas attack to Israel and the war that is still happening after that day. So this is what we are doing, and we are going to do it together. And what do you think where we are going to start? What is the first thing we hear from people around the world, especially in the US, asking you what they want to know about us?
People want to know our personal stories and what life is like for us, because it's completely unbelievable to many people, including us. They want to understand more about what's to come, what we expect to come, and really, like the name of the podcast, Beliefs and Consequences, and what's happening currently, and how viewers and listeners of the podcast can help us.
So we'll do that. So let's start with a brief description of the current situation, because in a year a lot happened. And then we'll give us our personal reflections and say a little about the connection between beliefs and consequences, because everything that we do comes from some beliefs, as we can see in the war also. And at the end, we'll tell you how you can participate or help us if you wish. So let's begin. The first thing I remember was in October 7, a year ago, very early in the morning. Yolanda told me that something is happening, rockets in the south. And unfortunately, at that point, it sounded familiar and almost routine, because rockets in the south are almost all the time. But very soon we saw the invasion from Hamas, the terrorists, into cities in Israel with their cars and their guns. So we understood something completely different. What's happening. It took a long time to realize that this is truly happened to everybody in Israel. It was shocking, because we never expected not the attempt. We never expected them to be so successful, and our response being so slow, so late. So you probably know everything that happened already after a year. But our first feeling was of shock, of disbelief, and not knowing what's going to happen next, because we never have a situation like that. Especially, we never had so many hostages being taken from ages 0 to 90, and still more than 100 are there. So it was absolutely shocking. It took time to, I don't know if to understand, because we are really still trying to focus on what happened, and looking at our lives before and after, like a big change, maybe like September 11th for many of you, maybe worse. So we are still dealing with a new reality that we'll tell you about later, because nothing ended yet. Unfortunately, it's only escalating. So this is my first, my memory of my first reaction when it happened a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually took the time to refresh my memory. I've wanted to block a lot of this out, understandably. But I remember that morning quite well, because I had spent the whole previous month of September getting up and going across the street to the sea, running, getting some exercise and sunshine, wanted to work on my health to improve it for the new year, last year. And I woke up that morning a little bit later than normal, at around 6:15 or something. And I had this really ominous feeling. And then I saw all of the alerts on the phone, from text notifications, from the news, from Twitter, from Homefront Command, and of course from the applications that we use that alert us of rockets, missiles, etc. And I saw what was happening, and I thought, should I wake Daniel up or not? Is this normal or not? And when I realized that it was no longer normal, I woke you up and said something really bad is happening. I went back and looked at text messages that I had with my dear friend Anita. We had been texting every morning for years, but more so since the protests against the government reform that we had participated in. And we had been saying for months, war is coming, war is coming, war is coming. This is really a bad situation we're in politically with our leadership. War is coming. But we didn't expect this. And I had to check on her and her family and our friends and family. And then I began to see some leaked footage of terrorists in the white truck. And they arrived at a kibbutz. And it all started. And then I thought, this is a really horrible movie. This absolutely cannot be happening. But it was. How have you dealt with things since that day, Danny?
Well, I think on the personal level, like everybody else, and I may even say everybody privileged, because we are in this situation, but many people in Israel are grieving. They have people who died already, many the first day, and the next 12 months since the war started. More than 100 are still hostages held in Gaza. A lot of people are fighting in the north now, and against Iran. We'll get to that soon. So we have a privilege in the sense that we don't have, we are not in the army ourselves fighting. My sons are not there. We don't have kids that we have to take care of, because many thousands of people from the north and the south left their homes, and they cannot go back to their homes, either because of Hezbollah from the north or Hamas from the south. So we have more than 100,000 people displaced. And as you see, in this episode, we speak about what's happening in Israel. Okay, we are not a news channel, so we don't have to balance things or complement stuff with what's happening in the rest of the world or across the border. We are sure you have enough sources of information, but we are telling you things that we experience, that we see from this side, and what understand may happen. So we are relatively privileged in that sense, that we are not in the front, we are not displaced, we are not hostages, etc. But a lot of people are suffering from that. And not only them directly, because Israel is relatively a small country with about 10 million people. So
about the size of New Jersey also.
Yeah, so I think also North Carolina has about 10 million people. It's much larger, North Carolina, geographically, but about the same population. So imagine a huge thing like this happen, being at war in all fronts, from close neighbors and faraway neighbors like Iran and Yemen. So when something like that happened to a small country, you almost cannot think about anything else. And everybody you meet, you see the moral, the national moral is accordingly. So this is what I can say about the aftermath of the war and to this day.
I just want to add that while many people were directly affected with their families, loved ones, they themselves, and kidnapped, people murdered, people tortured, people held hostage, and are still held hostage, the country's not the same. You can feel it in the air. A lot of people are suffering in different ways because war is not pretty. Beyond civilian casualties, there are great and far-reaching effects of war, and it affects a lot of people financially. People have lost their jobs. People are dealing with their spouse having to go serve. They're off to fight. longer than normal reserve duty, if they have children. Sometimes children aren't in school. Some children have been displaced from the north and haven't even started school in some areas. It's really difficult for people to pay bills, prices of everything going up. For example, the price of tomatoes now is sky high. It affects every aspect of life. When I go out with our dog, Taco, I think, oh, how close is it to 6:30 in the morning? Because that's around the time when this began to happen. And it's a time when lots of rockets from Gaza would come in. So 6:30 is kind of the ominous hour for me. And I get nervous when I see a white truck because of the footage that I saw, wondering what's going to happen and being hyper vigilant over every box, every bag I see on the sidewalk, wondering what's inside every time I hear a siren, and every time those horrible people with really loud motorcycles rev up and go down the street. It sounds like a siren, and I get terrified. For the past year, I haven't even wanted to be on social media, really in any capacity, because it's my nature to kind of cocoon. I go inside of myself, I get in a little zone and my little bubble to protect myself. But also because of, I don't know how to answer how I'm doing, how we're doing, because really my answer is same shit, different day. And there's a lot of hate online, and I just can't handle it for my own sanity. We stay abreast of the news. I was a news producer, so I'm still a news junkie, but I have to make a separation and put my thoughts and efforts into other things just to kind of stay sane. And that has made for quite a difficult year.
Yeah. So I will try to answer some questions that people ask about many things, almost randomly, but I hope you get an image at the end. And one of the things were about the responsibility of the government of Israel, about how it happened, what happened. So this is a good question because what happened was allowed by two things: the intention of Hamas in doing it and what we did and we didn't do, because everybody could believe that Hamas wanted to do that. It's not a secret, it's not surprising. It's a terror organization that the platform is the destruction of the state of Israel completely. No settlement whatsoever with Jews. So we're not surprised about they wanted to do it, but the fact that they succeeded so much and the army was not there and the intelligence, all these things are super traumatic because it's a surprise. It's like trusting your police and the police don't come, trusting your parents and they don't come. Something like that. Nobody in Israel believed that it would be so easy for Hamas to do what they did. So one of the things that allow it is not lack of information or lack of technology. As you probably know, Israeli intelligence and army and Israel in general is a very technological power in the area. So it's not a lack of means. The problem was what we call here in Israel the conception. There was a conception. And before I tell you what the conception was this time, I want to tell you why Israelis are aware of the concept in this context. Because in 1973, the October War or the Yom Kippur War was very traumatic for Israel. We were surprised by Egypt and Syria, surprise attack in Yom Kippur 73. And when I say surprise, is because the intelligence could know what's going on. There was a known opinion and information that they may attack Israel, but there was a conception. The conception says, no, they will never do it. After the terrible defeat they suffered in 67 from Israel, the Arab armies are crushed, demoralized. They will never dare attacking Israel, surprisingly. And that was the conception, because Israel could be very well prepared for that war. It was superior militarily. But it was taken for an astonishing surprise. The surprise was here. So I don't want to talk about that war, but this time the conception of the present government in Israel was that Hamas existence is good for Israel because the other part of the Palestinian representation, not in Gaza, in the West Bank, is the Palestinian Authority, which is much more moderate, and we have many arrangements with them already functioning, security matters, etc., in the West Bank. So this right-wing government always thought that we don't want a two-state solution. This is the right-wing ideology in Israel. We don't want a Palestinian state side by side. So we don't want to negotiate with them. So the best thing for us to have is a terrorist organization in government, like Hamas in Gaza Strip. So as long as Gaza Strip, nobody is going to pressure Israel to negotiate peace because nobody negotiated with ISIS or Al-Qaeda. If somebody tells you, I want to exterminate your complete country forever, you don't say, oh, let's talk about it and negotiate. So this is Hamas. So the right wing in Israel found it very convenient. Nobody's going to pressure us to retreat or to dismantle settlements. Who is going to negotiate? So that's why they kept Hamas growing, paradoxically. The right-wing, ultra-nationalist government helped even Hamas grow, allowing money to come in from Qatar and other Arab sources, and never fought Hamas. So this is the conception that Hamas existence, they are terrible people, etc., but we are strong, so it's good they exist side by side with us. They cannot do nothing serious to us, but they keep us from having to negotiate. So this is the conception. And because of that conception, Israeli army was focused on the West Bank, on the North, very well prepared for the things that didn't happen, but not prepared for the one thing that happened in the South. They were completely abandoned because of the conception. And the important is that conception means that it's not that we lack the means to defend ourselves. It's not like the Israeli army is weaker than Hamas, not even close to that. But when you're completely surprised and the other side was preparing for months, this is what happens. So this is the mental aspect of the Israeli side, that everybody is so damaged, desperate about, because it's not like a huge army of a superpower destroyed us. What could we do? It's not like the Holocaust or the Second World War, when Jews were completely defenseless. Here was the opposite. We were the stronger side, and we were completely surprised. So that's another thing why so many people are devastated, because it didn't even have to happen. Even if they tried, we supposedly were prepared for that.
And also, speaking of concepcia, the conception, there were many female, the word in English, I guess, is scouts in the IDF, who had sent it up the chain of command. They were noticing their job is to observe and to see what is out of place. And they've been saying there's training, something going on at the border. There's a problem. But because that unit is predominantly 90-something% women, if not more, they weren't taken really seriously. In addition to the thought of, no, we have to put our thoughts and resources into the West Bank, dealing with the settlements. Nothing's going to happen with Gaza. Hamas isn't going to do anything. Couple that with not listening to the women who were saying something, and sent it up the chain of command, and it kept getting knocked down further and further. It's something that is coming more to light now. And I think sociologists and military strategists will be studying this for quite a long time as to why they were not taken seriously, and the gender politics behind that still exist in the Middle East, still exist even in democratic Israel, that still exist within the IDF.
Yeah, that's a very important thing. You reminded me, when I mentioned the Yom Kippur War in 1973, Israel had a spy, an informant, in a crucial place in the Egyptian government. And that person say, what Egypt is preparing is to invade Israel. I mean, we had the best information, but when you don't believe something is going to happen, what's the point in doing something about it? That's why we call our podcast Beliefs and Consequences. And what we believe and we don't believe it's possible, unfortunately, you can see with us what the consequences are.
So what role do you think the religious extremism played into the lead up and also to the aftermath of the massacres on the 7th of October?
Well, this is a huge question because I think people living outside the Middle East usually think that there are conflicts everywhere, and this is one of them, which is maybe territorial, maybe something else, which is, but it's not only that. I don't think people in Europe or in Americas have experience in what religious war means, being surrounded by what we are surrounded. And I'm going to talk about religious extremism in Israel too. But first, we should know who Hamas is. And now we are talking about Hamas and also Hezbollah from Lebanon. So, as I said, Hamas is a Palestinian organization that rules the Strip of Gaza for about almost 20 years already. Absolutely not democratic, very oppressive to their own population.
After Israel left Gaza.
Yeah, Israel left
left.
The Gaza Strip, and the government who took over, unlike the West Bank, which is the Palestinian Authority, which are moderate and cooperate with Israel, Hamas is, the word means is an acronym of a movement of resistant opposition. So the basic aim is to erase the state of Israel from existence. So when you hear from the river to the sea, if you can see the map, I'm going to show the map of Israel. Israel exists between the river Jordan in the east to the Mediterranean Sea. So from the river to the sea is the whole state of Israel. When they say from the river to the sea Palestine will be free, they mean the whole state of Israel will cease to exist, and all that will be the state of Palestine. So it's not a slogan for peace. If you heard somebody singing from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, it's like saying from Spain to Russia, Europe will be free of Jews. I know you don't sing that, but it's the same thing because it's not a slogan for peace. You can sing from the river to the sea, Palestine and Israel will be free and live in peace. If you sing that, it's a great song. From the river to the sea is where the two-state solutions should happen. But Hamas don't want that. Okay, so there is nothing to negotiate in terms of a long-lasting peace with Hamas. And then we have in the north Hezbollah, which means the Party of God, which is a Lebanese terror organization, which don't have any territorial claim with Israel. Not settlements, not nothing. Hezbollah is just a terror organization whose goal is the same, to eradicate the existence of the state of Israel from the Middle East. So to make it short, you probably know about Al-Qaeda and ISIS, right? So the goal was to have a Muslim government, like a caliphate, that goes from Morocco to Indonesia to begin with Islamic governments, not just Arab or Muslim people, Islamic Sharia law governments. And that's the beginning before the rest of the world. So this is an ideology. If you think it's crazy or ridiculous, it may be crazy, but it's not ridiculous because it's not funny when they are your neighbors, right? If we say we want to conquer the world, you can laugh about it, but we are not your neighbors and we are not terrorists and we don't really mean it. They mean it. They're trying to do it for many generations already. So as you know who Al-Qaeda is and who ISIS is, there are others in this region, and we are surrounded by them. So the thing that you need to know about religious extremism is that these groups and these ideologies, they are not looking for peace or for peaceful coexistence, unless it's temporary until they have the power to do what they really want.
So when people scream for ceasefire, of course, we want a ceasefire. We want to stop the war. We want to get the remaining hostages and bring them home. We don't want to be in a war. But when you say a ceasefire, that means realistically what's going to happen. We're going to stop for a period of time, and they are going to just refuel, restock up. reorganize and try to come back to hit us once again.
Yeah, so the ceasefire we can have and we are going to have at some point would be like we had with Hamas before. It means they stop shelling rockets to Israeli cities and we stop the war as they started. So at one point it will happen and hopefully hostages will be back, but I don't know.
But sorry to interrupt you, but just to remember, we were in a ceasefire on October 7th, 2023.
Yeah. And also, the important thing to remember, the moment we have a ceasefire, whenever it happens, it's not a peace treaty, not even close to that. For example, after the wars with Egypt, we had, in 74, we had the first disengagement agreement after a ceasefire, and it was agreed by Israel and Egypt that soon we are going to have a peace agreement to live like two states, which are neighbors with embassies and everything. And that's what happened in the late 70s and early 80s, because Egypt is not a terrorist organization. So after the wars comes peace. The same with Jordan, we have peace agreement. With these people, Hamas, Hezbollah, and all the Muslim religious organizations, they say we will never have peace with us. They say, well, it took us more than one generation, more than one century to expel the Christians, the Crusades. Maybe with the Jews will take longer, but it will happen at the end. So everybody wants a ceasefire in the sense that we don't want people dying in Gaza, innocent people, and we don't want people dying in Israel. But remember, with these terrorists, there will never be a peace agreement because they say so. Don't believe me, believe them. If you don't speak Arabic, that could be a problem, but some people understand Arabic around here and we know what they're saying, especially because they are doing it also. They're trying to implement it. So the reason we are speaking about Hezbollah from Lebanon too, I want to say a few sentences because we have Iran, which is the sponsor, is the superpower of this ideology, of this Islamic warlike ideology of destruction of Israel and terrorism around the world in general. So Iran is the one operating Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and other pro-Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq. All of them already attacked Israel more than once lately, the last year, because they are the proxies of Iran. The dream of Hamas, Sinwar leader, was that he invading Israel will trigger Hezbollah invading Israel from the north, Iran attacking us with missiles, and all the other militias from the countries I mentioned doing the same, and having Israel fighting in 5 or 6 fronts simultaneously until we collapse. So it didn't exactly happen as they want, but we are at war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. We were already attacked by Iran, by missiles, and by other pro-Iranian militias in Syria, Lebanon, Houthis from Yemen in the south. So you can see in the map of the Middle East where all these organizations are. And as we know, at the present, you don't have to physically be able to invade with your boots. You can send missiles. Some of the missiles are, most of them are made in Iran. Iran is even supplying missiles to Russia to use in Ukraine. So you see how the axis works. Russia is very isolated. Iran is very isolated. For a similar reason, they are both terrorist countries, invading neighbors and attacking neighbors. So they're helping each other. Anyway, Iran, in his plan to destroy the state of Israel, as they stated many times, even before they have nuclear capabilities, they were very close. In the meantime, they can use Hezbollah, Houthi, Hamas, all the proxies around to attack Israel, hoping that Israel will not retaliate very strongly against Iran. So this is more or less the map of Islamic extremism in the Middle East. And because it's not the whole Arab world or the whole Muslim world, because of that, we have allies quietly, but we have allies like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and other countries that also participate in fighting the missiles coming from Iraq and from Yemen, etc., because the Arab world is completely split from the Muslim world, because Iranians are not Arabs. So there is an ongoing conflict between so-called moderate Arab countries that don't want to be at war and launching missiles, and on the other side, Iran and its proxies. So we have allies in the Middle East, which don't want this thing going on. So the common thing, just to round up, the common thing all these groups have, Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and you may know of others, is the common goal and common means. The goal is to take over the world, to begin with countries that are already mostly Muslims, to make them be religious Sharia countries. And in the future, to go back to occupying southern Spain, like they did centuries ago, and the rest of the world. This is an ideology. It's not funny. I remember when people in America were afraid of communism because of the same reason, because they say, okay, they started with Russia, now they have all Eastern Europe, now Afghanistan, and then Southeast Asia. So the communists were not very successful after less than a century, but these Muslims are not going anywhere. And their ideology is almost 15 centuries old. So it's not like communism comes and goes. They are still here. And the problem is when you have the ideology of the 7th century AD with the weapons of the 21st century in the hands of the same insane fundamentalist. So we are dealing with it.
Speaking on that, one of the things that people have asked rhetorically or directly to us is, okay, so why doesn't Egypt take in the Palestinians? Why doesn't Jordan? Let's talk about Black September. There's a reason why that other Muslim countries don't want to take in this particular group of Palestinians.
Yeah, because they were militants and they brought violence to their state. But, in Jordan, more than 50% of the population is already from Palestinian origin. So there are Palestinians everywhere. The solution we should have at some point should have been the two-state solution here. But I don't know if it's still possible because of both sides. And we'll see what happens with that solution. But so far, we are not even in a situation we can restart negotiation. I think that one day, if real negotiations start, will be only by international pressure. Obviously, these two peoples are not able to solve it for themselves, unfortunately.
But we have been presented with options for peace and two-state solutions several times before. And who's been the one to say no?
Well, depends when. Since 48 to the 80s, it was the Arab side. After the PLO recognizes Israel, and we have started having right-wing governments since the end of 70s here, and they started with the settlements to prevent the two-state solution. So we have it in both sides. For example, the present government in Israel, unlike most of the governments before, but the present one is openly against two-state solution, even in theory, even if the neighbors were nice Scandinavians with flowers, they have a Jewish Orthodox belief that the whole land from the river to the sea again was promised by God to the Jews only. So with this ideology, obviously they're not going to negotiate anything.
Yes, God told Abraham, look to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west. All of this is yours. And some people take that completely to heart. We're not citizens of the world, and we don't all share this big spinning blue rock together. No, some people believe this area was given to us by God. From this point to this point, it's ours forever, and everybody else out.
That's why why this particular coalition government in Israel is never going to negotiate peace treaties and having two states. They openly say we will never have a Palestinian state anywhere around here. So this is the Israeli side. It wasn't always like that, and still a large part of the Israeli population would like to have some long-lasting peace, but it's never going to happen with this corrupt government. We're going to talk a little bit about them soon, because there is a connection. And I see that one of the things people ask you, right, it's about the connection between what was happening in Israel before the attack.
Right, yeah. So how the judiciary reform debate intersected with the aftermath of the attacks.
Yeah, so, okay, so we have, let's make it short, because the information, if you want it, you have it everywhere else for many years already. In Israel, we have a very corrupt prime minister who is trying to run from justice by staying in government. You may have the same situation next month in the US, but we have a prime minister running from jail and from trial. Unlike the US, when, for example, Trump's trial lasted like 4 weeks before he was convicted, in Israel, it's already going for like 4 or 5 years. One trial with Netanyahu while he's prime minister running from justice. So in order to stay away from finishing the trial and whatever comes later, he's holding a coalition of ultra-extremist Orthodox Jews of all kinds. And this is the conception that I mentioned before. It's held by these kind of people, are completely fundamentalist religious. They will never have peace with anyone if they are not forced to do it. So before the war started, and one of the reasons that Hamas thought this was a good opportunity to surprise Israel, they thought Israel was very weak, because this Netanyahu coalition was trying to do a overhaul, judicial overhaul, like changing the country completely, destroying the courts and the judiciary and giving him superpowers. A huge reform that was going to make Israel very bad, very far from a democracy, much more religious, much less pluralistic. And this is what they were trying to do. And that's why Israel was on the brink of fighting each other, almost a war, because every Democrat in this country who grew up in the democratic country were fighting, including us, to stop this revolution. So this is why Israel was seen as very, very weak from the outside by our enemies, because we saw us fighting for the existence of democracy against each other. So this is the connection between the present leadership, the present coalition, which we started talking about like 3 years ago. Long before this government existed, we, in our podcast, which is in Hebrew, Beliefs and Consequences, we started warning that the coalition that Netanyahu is going to form is going to be with the worst terror-supporting extreme Jewish right wing ever in this country. And they gave them everything they want to have a coalition, because he has to be in power. Otherwise, he's lost. Going to be inquiries and more trial and jail at the end. So he gave the most dangerous and more incompetent people everything, every ministry, economy, everything else. That's why we are in this situation we are. We were never in this situation, and it took them about 2 years to almost completely destroy this country from the inside, the economy, from the outside. As you see, we are in flames on all fronts. This is what's so-called a fully right-wing government. So we have the less competent people now dealing with the situation, and it looks like.
No,
Exactly.
sounds familiar, as also in Amir.
So there are some similarities, yes. There are some people who need to be in government, otherwise they're going to jail. You know, you can say some person is running for president, but the same person is running from other trials and jail. So in Israel, unfortunately, we don't have trials that take a few weeks. In a best case, will take a few years and still going on, and we don't know how it's going to end.
Let's talk a bit about our crisis in faith in our leadership, not only ours personally, but that of Israelis in general, how the attacks have led to a significant loss in trust of the government and the government's ability to actually protect us.
Well, you know what? Obviously, I didn't have much trust on this specific bunch of crooks and incompetent people that never did nothing good in their life for this country, and you can go one by one. I never expected them to do anything right. I expected the worst. But the one thing I did expect and didn't happen is that the Israeli army and Israeli intelligence will never allow these catastrophic things to be done to us by Hamas. I mean, we are not attacked by China or Russia, right? It's Hamas. It's the smallest of our Israeli enemy. Hezbollah is also not a country. It's a terrorist organization, but it's huge compared to Hamas. Hamas is smaller than anyone else, and they are surrounded by us geographically, on land, on sea, by Egypt, on the air. So I was sure, I mean, I believed when the army said that we are okay. They are deterred, whatever they do, like many times in the past, they shoot some rockets to some cities. After a few weeks, they are defeated somehow. I never expected that they can occupy parts of the south of Israel for hours, maybe a day, to kidnap hundreds of people, to kill thousands of people, and still fighting after a year. So yes, I was surprised, not that this government is not good for me, this government is terrible for everybody, but that the army failed to, again, in the 21st century against Hamas. So that made me worried a lot. And the other thing that we have to change is the conception I mentioned. We have to think rationally. The fact that Israel is doing relatively well military now against Iran and others is because when we think rationally, we have good people here doing their job of defending from complete annihilation. But when we are talking about leadership, you not need soldiers as leaders. We don't have it either, but we need people who can think, people who are not corrupt, people who don't belong to religious extreme sects of ultranationalists with crazy ideas that the end of the world, the doom of whatever, we are going to win a huge end of the world war and salvation. I know there are Christians and Jews that think these kind of things, but the moment they are in leadership situations, what do you think is going to happen? So this is the leadership we have now, completely detached from reality, but from time to time they are forced to deal with reality by us, the citizens, but our allies. So we're trying to act rationally. And before we close our stories, I want to tell you that specifically these days, since we were attacked by missiles from Iran, as you know, we are waiting to see what the Israel reaction will be, which is promised to happen by our leadership. Everybody's expecting an Israeli attack on Iran. And then, of course, what comes later is an Iranian attack against us once more. So if it sounds ridiculous that we get punched, everything escalates, yes, it's as ridiculous as humankind is. All history, you can look back and ask, why did they have to do that? They can reach the same result, skipping the victims and the war, right? But this is our condition as human so far. So these days we are waiting to see what our government, Israel, is going to do, our military is going to do in Iran, how hard our response will be. Maybe we're going to attack the energy installations, maybe the nuclear installation, what our allies are going to do. And at some point, we're probably going to be back in this room, in this security room, because the Iranians will shoot at us again.
And actually, I've been checking my phone for updates because quite recently there were more alerts in Tel Aviv and surrounding areas. So we're just waiting in anticipation for when it will happen for us as well.
Yeah, today I think they're still coming from Gaza, from the south. But the day the Iranians launched about 180 missiles to Israel, the whole country was under alert. Remember, Israel is a tiny little country, so it's very easy to put the whole country under alerts and make us be in the safe room or shelters for a while. So we still expect the same thing happening, maybe bigger than the last time, because Israel is going to react and the Iranians are going to react. And this is the time where we are recording this bit, because maybe some of you will hear it after something happened. I don't know. It's very dynamic, the situation here. So we are expecting the unknown again.
So this recap, this update on this past year has been quite emotional for me to even just think about it, to have a short discussion about it, and to kind of catch people up and to hear from us, and to hear from us in English for an audience that doesn't usually follow the podcast. Beliefs and consequences, really. The deeply held beliefs, whether they're political, religious, or societal, have real world consequences.
Yes, and as we said, we started with this channel, with the podcast at the beginning, about more than 3 years ago, long before this government existed. But we warned about things, not about Hamas, but we could be well prepared for Hamas if we had a different government, a rational, non-corrupt coalition of people working for us. There was no reason in the world that Hamas should have been so successful. And because they were so successful, because our failure, that's why we have now a global complication, because Hezbollah started being part of this war to help Hamas. And Iran the same. And now we have like 5 or 6 fronts around the Middle East because our failure to deal originally with Hamas, that should have been much more possible and successful than we did. If we ask about beliefs and consequences, okay, inside Israel, the conception, the belief that we are so strong and they are so defeated and deterred that they will never dare. We have so many obstacles and power and technology. So this is a belief, and that's the consequences that we are living now. Around us, the belief that is shaping the region, the Middle East, is fundamentalistic Islamic group, Shia especially, but not only. The head is Iran. The arms are all the other allies, militias, or proxies around us, and they're all fighting against what they see as a threat to their ideology, because Israel is a democracy, because many other things. Our allies are on the West. They have a war on the West, on democracy, on everything else. And I'm not forgetting the Palestinian people's rights, but the Palestinians should have leadership like they have in the West Bank that will negotiate existing side by side with Israel. Hamas is a different thing. You may have rights about something, but if you choose the devil to kill everybody else in your name, nobody's going to negotiate your legitimate rights. So whatever legitimate right the people in Gaza have to live peacefully, it will have to happen after they are ruled by this organization, Hamas, which is terrible to them, by the way, to women, to LGTB, and to people in general.
Using people as human shields.
Yes.
Having weapons in schools.
Living in Gaza was a nightmare for a long time. All the concrete they had the last 10 years and all the millions of dollars they got from rich Arab countries went to build a parallel Gaza Strip underground, but not for everybody. When Israel is attacking, they don't have sirens and shelters because they use the concrete to build for the leadership of Hamas and the terrorist fighters parallel cities underground. That's why some of them still survive after a year of fighting, because everything is under mosques, schools, hospitals, etc. The population don't even alert, don't even have safe rooms, because Hamas didn't care about the population. They prepared a war knowing that Israel is going to have a devastating attack on them because what they're going to do. And what did they do for their population? Nothing. They ran like rats underground, and they left everybody else die on the ground.
But hey, it looks good on the news for them. Look at how many women and children Israel has killed.
So what I personally would like to see in this country, I live here for more than 40 years, is the same. I would like to see two states living in peace. Sometimes it looked possible, sometimes it looked impossible. We know what will never happen. Hamas, Hezbollah, and this kind of group will never live in peace with anyone. Never. And never means never. It's not like communism or other ideologies that can come and go. And they say so.
Yes. What do people, sorry to interrupt you, but what do people really think would happen if they are successful in obliterating Israel, getting rid of all the Jews? Israel's done. They take over. What then? Who are they coming after next?
Well, they will try everything everywhere, since the plan is global, the ideology is global. They try everywhere it's possible. For example, ISIS was born out of that the state of Iraq collapsed after the Americans invaded Iraq and destroyed Saddam Hussein. Was a terrible idea because that allowed what happens now. The biggest enemy of Iraq was Iran. Iran was the big problem. So look what Iran did after the Americans gave them the favor of annihilating the Iraqi regime. They destroyed Iraq. ISIS was born. They invaded Syria, everywhere else. We have millions of Arab refugees in Europe because of ISIS, because of taking down Saddam Hussein. Another great idea of Netanyahu that he told Bush, if you take Saddam Hussein, great things will happen in the Middle East. Okay, the great things is 10 million refugees, many more displaced, a lot of victims, ISIS. All this happened because we did this great idea of taking Saddam Hussein out, forgetting that the neighbor is Iran. Iran and Iraq had a war. They kept each other more or less unchecked until we did our terrible mistake. But this is ancient history. The only thing we need here is surviving this ideology around us, because this Islamic ideology is not going anywhere. So we need a government in Israel which is rational, not fundamentalist, not corrupt, normal people working for the country. We don't have that the last couple of years. And we need neighbors that also take part in amending their ways, because we cannot do it only by ourselves. In Gaza Strip, at some point, there will have to be a rule of normal human beings, like in the West Bank. And also, we will probably see a lot of pressure from around the world, but because, as you can see, sometimes you leave two kids that will fight forever until the grown-ups come. Obviously, we here, Israelis and Palestinians, if you look back the last 100 years, we are not very good at reaching agreements by ourselves. We need some help, pressure, whatever comes.
But speaking of leaving two children together fighting, it reminds me of the story you told me about when your oldest son was born in Jerusalem.
Yes, Shai, my oldest son, was born 37 years ago, and we lived in Jerusalem. So in Jerusalem is a very well-known hospital of Hadassah, and in Jerusalem many Jews and Arabs live. So when he was a little baby and I was looking at him, about 1 day old, I saw another baby close to him that looked more or less the same. And I thought, if these two babies are taken to the same house, to the same area in Jerusalem, they are told that they are brothers, they probably love each other, play for the rest of their lives. Sometimes they have a little fight. But the truth was that that baby was going to be taken to East Jerusalem, to his Arab parents. And my son was taken to the West Jerusalem. And I thought that day, if one day they meet, it could be with uniform. We'd be aiming at each other. Because to love each other, you don't need to invent any story. But to hate others and try to kill them, they have to listen to a lot of bullshit ideology and extremism. And this is what happens. When kids learn that they have to exterminate somebody else, this is what happens. They were born free of that ideology, free of those beliefs. That's why we'll talk about beliefs and consequences. Beliefs are the thing that poison the existence, because we are born free of anything telling me who should I kill, who God said deserve this and who doesn't deserve it. No, I don't have any eternal mission like that. First of all, we have to live in peace with each other, and then we'll do whatever we want. Don't inherit and keep passing to the next generation bad ideologies that tell people how to kill. But this is the region in the world we are living on. So we hope we have a different future.
Yeah, and just like our national anthem in Israel, Hatikra, the hope, we do still have some hope.
Yes. Yes. What else can we do? Something terrible happened in your life, in my life. What are you going to do? Like quit?
Yeah.
So we're still here.
There's something that we were talking about a few days ago, that maybe out of all of this, some really great things could happen, like if we do have a major action in Iran that could facilitate an uprising of the citizens of Iran, who many have been cheering for Israel since our attacks recently on Hezbollah in Lebanon, and taking some action in Iran currently. That could be an amazing, beautiful thing to see. Beliefs changing, politics changing, regimes changing. That could give people some hope. Remember, war is always disgusting, horrible, and innocent people really get hurt and affected in a myriad of ways in war. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's not kid ourselves. But something positive can come out of it. Think of the Arab Spring from over a decade ago. So if we could have something like that, it gives me a whole lot of hope. I would love to go to Iran, love to see the family members of all of my Persian friends, love history, culture. I would be so elated to have a free Iran where people can choose to live and observe their religion as they want, where they're not forced to do anything oppressive and repressive, and things can be open for tourism, funnel in money and ideas and an exchange of ideas. It could be a beautiful thing. And that's something that I have a hope for in the broader sense of things, considering all of these conflicts and wars that we're engaging in right now. And of course, I still have hope for Israel, and that the remaining hostages will be able to be rescued and go home to their families and get all of the help that they will need.
Yes, and I personally were happy to go to Iraq because of the archaeology. Everything about Babylon, Assyria, Akkadians, Sumerians, everything I'm very interested about happened in Iraq. So I hope one day we can go all these places.
So, dear podcast listeners, just a reminder that the past few months we have had episodes on YouTube. We invite you to join us on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube now in English, we hope you will still subscribe to stay on top of any future episodes we have in English. Let us know if you want an English language channel for Beliefs and Consequences also. It's a lot of work for us, but we would appreciate your support and, of course, your feedback. There are other ways that you can support us as well. You can go to our website, beliefsandconsequences.com. We have a new shop that's up. Order your t-shirts. New designs are coming soon. We have mugs, shirts, hats, and, of course, PayPal and Patreon as well. So we invite you, listeners and viewers, to also reflect on your own beliefs and think about how you can contribute to positive change for Israel, Gaza, Palestine, in your own communities as well, of course. There was a horrible hurricane that affected my home state of North Carolina. Many people in Western North Carolina are really suffering. There's another hurricane headed towards Florida now. Think about your beliefs and their consequences, positive and negative, how you can really support initiatives that promote peace and security in Israel and beyond.
So since we took the commitment of having more episodes in English, which is tough for some of the stuff here, but when we promised we do it, we would like to have your questions, because, it's so much information. You can get that idea just by listening to us. We can talk about so many different subjects. We want to know what is important for you to see that you don't see in the headlines or in the news, what things you really would like to hear from us. And the moment we have these questions, we will make from time to time episodes in English with Q&A and try to give you the best responses as people who can read and write, can breathe, can feel things, can learn. And we are learning very fast from experience, from the changing reality every day. So if you want to have us talking to you about it, we will be happy to do it. And you can help us by supporting the channel in all the ways Yolanda just said, and also telling us the content you would like to see.
Yes, so you can send in your questions in English or in Espanol to Daniel at beliefsandconsequences.com. You can send them at any time to be answered directly to you via email or for us to discuss in future episodes. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your support in every way. Again, you can go to beliefsandconsequences.com. We have a section in English with links to organizations you can contact to provide your support for them as well, to help all of the people who've been affected since 7th of October of last year. You will also see ways you can support us to keep our podcast and this new YouTube channel growing. And again, with the shop online, always reach out to us, contact us. We get back in touch with you as soon as we can. Stay positive, stay safe, keep some hope. Thank you for joining us. And before our usual outro, we're going to have a moment to remember the people who are still kidnapped, being presumed held in Gaza.